Even now, I wonder how this game evaded my gaze for the longest time. It seems to have come out of nowhere, and being a fan of the Resident Evil games, it'd be a shame to let this one slip by. Today I want to talk about Phase Zero, a retro-style survival horror title from Spina Studios. At the very top, I want to tell you, if you enjoy the old Resident Evil games or retro horror in general, and you have Steam installed on your PC, then this is a no-brainer. The demo is out now, give it a go, I guarantee you, you won't be disappointed. Otherwise, if you want to hear my thoughts on it, I'll be glad to break it down for you. Also, if by some miracle you're a dev and watching this, there's one or two takeaways I can give you that might help you create a slightly better experience. With that, let's get into the Phase Zero demo.
Phase Zero.
So the game takes place in the small quiet town of Flint Peak in the middle of a snowstorm, where you, as the appropriately named Guy, wakes up in a hospital bed at precisely the right moment to catch the hospital staff giving you the "hey, you awake?" treatment. Why a bunch of zombies would stand around just waiting for you to wake up is beyond me, but I love it. Once you make it to the window, you're greeted with one of the most confusing movement tutorials I've ever seen in modern gaming. With your character facing you, press up to move forward, in which case, Guy starts shimming to the left of the screen. At this point, if it isn't clear, that would be the unmistakable stench of tank controls. Obviously, I'm not the biggest fan of tank controls, but the good news is you can change it to modern, which has your character face whichever direction you push the analog stick. Once I did this, it felt like an enormous weight was lifted off my back, and immediately I was able to get a good feel for the controls. And I gotta stress the importance of good movement. To a person like myself, if a game doesn't feel good to handle, it can be a huge turnoff for me. I'm glad to report this game handles really well. From walking to running to shooting, this game feels good to play, complete with an intuitive button scheme to kick. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I was talking about the tank controls. Here's a small note for the devs. I had to go into the settings to activate the analog sticks from off to modern, which is not a train smash, but why isn't it on by default? Setting it to modern allows for the D-pad to stay tank controls, while the analog stick allows you to move in any direction you push. Even though I will never use tanks though, it's nice to have the option there for those of you who enjoy it. Look, I make fun of tank controls, but the truth is, I'm envious of people who can use it. Unfortunately, my brain doesn't work that way, so I'm glad it's optional. Next, let's talk about combat. For starters, gunplay feels nice and punchy. For some reason, you get a shotgun as your first weapon, which is a bit unconventional but a welcome surprise. Although I do have a feeling this might change in the full release. Holding the aim button gets Guy to lock onto the nearest enemy. If you've ever played Resident Evil, you'll find a similar feel here. Except Resident Evil sometimes require you to manually aim up or down depending on certain enemies. Phase Zero instead automatically locks you on regardless of the enemy's height, requiring no further input from the player. As far as I can tell, he will always aim at the chest, and sometimes if you're lucky, you might get a headshot. I think maybe the distance between you and the enemy might have a sweet spot that guarantees a critical, but that's just speculation. What you do get in terms of aimed control is the ability to move back and forth while aiming, which is very much a modern convention. But that comes with a rather weird exception. You can only do this while using tank controls. You see, if you use the analog stick and try to move while aiming, he just swings around to face whichever direction you push. It kind of makes sense in a technical way, but I like to think of it more as receiving a bonus if you're brave enough to play with tank controls. Usually these kind of games have you planted on the spot when aiming. Personally, I kind of prefer that trope for these games. I feel like committing to a decision to either stand and fight or reposition makes for some really tense moments. Next, zombies. So I'm a bit conflicted on the zombies themselves. Reason being, I feel like I've already clocked them in this short 40-minute demo. They only seem to have one attack, and as a result, I can calculate how many encounters I can survive until I die, which kind of ruins the thrill somewhat. Let me explain. In this game, zombies have one move, and that is to grapple and damage you or bite you if they get close enough. Now, if I'm on caution, I know for a fact that I can tank one hit before it puts me into danger, and I will need to heal, meaning I can plan my next move and calculate my safety because I know the zombie in my path can only do so much damage. Survival horror is meant to be perilous. You're meant to be unsure of each threat. Each risk you take should be unpredictable. What I'm saying is, I wish the zombies had a wider range of attacks. For example, maybe if you try to bolt boss one, they might only swipe at you, dealing less damage than the standard grapple. Or maybe every so often a grapple might be a critical and be an insta-kill or do double damage. Make it so that the zombies pose a potentially fatal threat at all times. If you ever played Resident Evil 1, then you're well aware of the hunter's ability to one-shot you, regardless of how much health you have. In my experience, it never happened that often, but the threat was always there, and that's what made them so intimidating. Now, I'm not asking for hunters in this game, but I would like to see a bit more variety in the zombies' behavior. I have no doubt there will be more enemy types in the full release, but I imagine zombies will be the most prevalent. I hope it'll be enough to shake things up regularly and keep things fresh. Being a retro survival horror title, it's gotta have some good puzzles. And judging from the one in the demo, I'm cautiously optimistic for the full release. You see, the first part of the puzzle has you calibrate an X-ray machine. Simply put, this wasn't a fun piece of the puzzle. Yes, they do give you a document detailing how to correctly adjust the variables to get the desired effect, but in practice, it's not at all clear what that's supposed to look like. And it doesn't help that the machine keeps telling you the values are fine each time, yet still fails to work. The result is you fiddling with the values until you eventually brute force your way through it. As a player, I don't want to come out of the puzzle feeling irritated, I want to feel good about solving it myself. Nevertheless, after getting past that hiccup, the next part of the puzzle has you cart the infected corpse of a janitor to an MRI machine so you can magnetically extract a crank from its swollen body. Yes, I want more of this in the game. Yeah, it's not that much of a puzzle than it is a gruesome surgery, but this was so creative and fun, almost making up for that shitty X-ray segment. Levels. So, once again, I'm a bit mixed on the subject. Level design is pretty vanilla if you ask me. That's not a bad thing, mind you. I'm so good with vanilla, especially when it's aping that Silent Hill / Resident Evil style. In this demo, you're restricted to the hospital, and starting on the 4th floor, you very quickly discover a floor plan of this level, giving you access to a map depicting all the available rooms. As you inspect each door, it'll automatically mark it on your map as locked or unlocked, exactly how it does on any Silent Hill game. However, my main concern with level design is the spaces themselves. What I've noticed is that you often find yourself in rather tight spaces in this game, and while it could make for a more stressful time, which is great for horror and tension, I feel it has taken it a bit too far. You see, there's points in this game where if you were to retreat from danger, you'd quickly find yourself overwhelmed with no hope of escape. From my experience, the trick to a good survival horror loop is one that skirts the line of hopefulness and hopelessness, by giving you just enough to get by with a safe cushion, or to squeak by like a small fart through clenched cheeks. Either way, failure shouldn't be a drawn-out process. It should come quick and suddenly, otherwise risk losing its impact. Getting trapped in a room with no escape is not fun, nor is it scary. There's no tension when you know your death is inevitable no matter what you do, which leads me back to how tight some of these spaces are. In a game like Resident Evil, there were plenty of tight and claustrophobic passages and rooms. Sometimes getting through these sections with no supplies could seem hopeless, but with enough skill and know-how was always a possibility. Simply put, with the way some of these areas are set up, there's absolutely no means of surviving the encounter. I hope this section doesn't set a precedent for the level design of the full game. It feels like this whole encounter was tailor-made for an intended route. Go here, get these bullets, shoot these zombies. Go here, get these bullets, shoot these zombies. Only then will you make it through safely, because that is how it was set up. I don't want to be directed and driven through each encounter. Instead, I want to be handed supplies sparingly, just enough to make me believe I'm getting that slight edge in combat to get me through to the next one. Getting through an encounter by the skin of your teeth is the very essence that makes a survival horror game. Okay, seeing as this one is going on a bit too long for what is a 40-minute demo, I'm gonna try to wrap it up as best I can and rifle through some of the aspects of the game worth mentioning. For starters, you may have noticed the snowflake on screen. These indicate an autosave point. As far as I'm aware, there will be manual save points in the full release. I can't imagine having only autosaves, as it could royally mess up your game if you're not careful. Next, there will be 2 playable characters. I'm not 100% sure if that'll be a choice of 2 characters to start with, or if it'll be 2 separate pieces of the story. Next, at the time of writing, there is no set date for the release of this game. And also, I didn't mention this at the top because I didn't think too much of it, but the story plays out in a traditional survival horror fashion. Every now and then you'll be graced with a cutscene, and during the adventure you'll come across snippets of backstory in the form of notes, letters, newspaper clippings and the like. And lastly, from what I've gathered, inventory works a bit different from the old Resident Evil titles. The game separates key items from your supplies, ensuring your backpack isn't topped up with key items, leaving you without space for ammo and healables and stuff like that. Although my opinion of this game might come across as kind of harsh, I want to emphasize this game is amazing. If I'm critical on any aspects of this game, it is because I believe it has the potential to be truly special. It's done well to tick so many of the boxes of what I look for in these types of games, and I know many of you out there believe the same. It really does feel like a love letter to the survival horror of old. Alright, that's gonna be it for this one. I want to thank you if you made it this far. You know what to do, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you have played Phase Zero, let me know what you think about it in the comments. And with that, I want to thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.